Welcome everybody, welcome. Welcome to PM Week. I'm gonna give a few minutes for everyone to come in and settle down. Please check the chat. We are sending some questions for you there so you can interact, get to know each other. Thank you so much for coming. We have amazing events for you. So again, thank you so much for joining us, interacting in the chat so we can warm up and get to know each other as we wait for some of the other participants to come in. Today we're going to have a very special masterclass. I hope you're ready to take notes, get your pen, get your pencil, get your notepad, whatever you need. So you're ready, because this has been a very insightful session set that we put together. So I hope you get the most out of it. Okay, I think we're good to go. Let's get started. Gave it a few minutes for people to come in, a few seconds. Let's get it. Okay, everyone, so welcome to Product Week, an event designed to help you level up your PM skills and career. This event is powered by ADPList, the biggest peer-to-peer learning platform in the world. If you want to learn, get mentored from the best tech talents in the world, discuss ideas and network, ADPList is the perfect match for you. We are 100% free. In this PM week, we have a bounty. You can have a chance to win an Apple Watch. For Product Week, we are giving away an Apple Watch, kindly sponsored by Product Academy. All you have to do is share what you've learned from our sessions on LinkedIn and Twitter. Tag the speaker and ADPList. Details will be shared in the chat session in a minute. Now, for us to run this session smoothly, a few housekeeping rules. Keep your cameras on at all times. Please use your real name on Zoom and Slido. Presentation will be 30 minutes and quickly followed by a 15 minutes Q&A. For Q&A, we are using Slido to manage your questions. Scan the QR code behind me, click on the link in the chat, or click on the link in the chat. It will redirect you to the same link where you can ask all of your questions. Please remember to send questions with your name, since anonymous questions won't be considered. You can also upvote each other's questions so our speaker can answer them. This session will be recorded and we will share the recording as soon as it is available. Today we have Gireesh, and Gireesh is VP Product and Engineering at Zeta, former VP Product Manager at Freshworks. Gireesh is a product manager, passionate about building large-scale enterprises, SaaS products, curious about the world around us, and always up for an interesting conversation. He's also an optimist. So now I will hand it over to Gireesh, our very special guest for the day. Thank you so much for being with us. It's with you. Take it away.
Hey, thank you. Good morning, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon too, depending on where you're joining from. Over the next 60 minutes or so, I'd love to lead this conversation on my experience building enterprise SaaS products and how to get your products enterprise ready too, right? So that's kind of the context that I want to share what we'll talk about. I have a presentation that will probably guide. I'm guessing all of you can see my screen. So
yes, go ahead.
So what does making your SaaS product enterprise ready even mean, right? There are multiple ways to build your product, right? You don't need to build them as enterprise ready products. So like a good product manager, the first question you should ask for this session too is, okay, before I learn how to make my SaaS product enterprise ready, why should I make it enterprise ready, right? And it should start with that why. In my opinion, I've seen 4 different variations of how companies get to this stage when they think about, hey, how do we sell our product to enterprise companies? The first and the most obvious one is the founding vision. So from day one, the founders seen that they believe in selling to large enterprises. In a lot of cases, there is also like a product market fit. There is a founder market product fit. So the founder thinks enterprise, wants to build enterprise, has perhaps seen this in his or her career before. So the founding vision really is from day one to sell to large companies and not to sell to small and medium businesses, for example, right? So that's one reason that you say, hey, this is why the company exists. Our founding vision is we will sell only to large enterprises. An example could be a company like Palo Alto Networks or Snowflake, right? So where you're going to sell to large companies. The second one is an evolution, right? You start out selling to SMBs, right? You build out a SaaS offering for a particular niche of a customer segment where okay, small customers, smaller businesses, right? And we are talking everything in the context of a B2B software. So it's business to business software. So in that context, you start selling to smaller B2B companies, typically your SMB companies, and then realize that for a longer term, both revenue and also sustenance of the company, perhaps moving up market along with serving SMB and serving enterprise is probably how your company should evolve. And there are tons of examples like this, right? Like a company like Salesforce, Zendesk, Freshworks, all famously followed this evolution where they started selling to smaller companies. And then as they perfected the problem that they're solving and the products got better, they started moving up market, serving both SMB and enterprise. So they really look at wealth at the top of the pyramid, right? The next two are messier, but real life things that do happen too, right? So one is a survival plan. So it may not be on day one that you figure that you want to sell to enterprises, but as a startup or as a product in general, you're trying to find your product market fit. You've not really found that niche where you can repeatably sell. So you're pivoting to figure whom do I sell to? And it looks like, hey, you know what, for the problem space that we've been working on or what is really closer, maybe selling to enterprises is a better repeatable product market fit for us, right? So you think that's probably what your strategy should be. So I think that's again your survival plan. The company is not really evolving now. You're still trying to survive because you've not hit repeatable product market fit. That's one reason why you would choose to be enterprise fit. The fourth one, which in my mind is the most interesting, and you'd be surprised so many companies fall in this, is adapting to chance. The company didn't think on day one that they wanted to be. So there wasn't the founding vision to be enterprise from day one. They are not successful as a product company at the bottom half with SMBs. So they're not evolving. And they're also at a place where they're not really trying to survive, in the sense that by chance they got some enterprise customers and they ended up solving what you will characterize as big company problems. So by chance they ended up getting perhaps one large customer, give them a contract and then say, hey, you build something for us. And they realize that, hey, you know what, we can actually build it in a way that I can now address a much bigger segment, right? An industry itself with what I'm building for this one customer. So it's really adapting to chance. So all these four, so the founding vision, evolution of a company, the survival plan leading to serving enterprises, or just adapting to pure chance. It could be either of the four. And why this is important and why I'm starting with this is, if you're a product manager and you're trying to get your SaaS product enterprise ready, you need to know where your company fits in one of these four. And thinking broadly, every company would fit in one of these four, because your challenges and what you need to do will vary. Because if it's founding vision, you're literally starting on a clean slate. From day one, you could do this. If you're evolving, you already have a good business, you have good product market fit, and you have a reasonably good product that you're selling to SMB. If you are surviving, you're probably going to throw away a lot of what you did before, because you're really pivoting to find product market fit. If you're adapting to chance, this is the messiest, where the company didn't have a plan, is now making a plan to be enterprise ready. You're building the product. You already have at least one or two enterprise customers whom you got by chance working with you. So there's going to be a lot of, the pressures are all different, right? So, and why I have this framework is is to first put you at ease on why you have the challenges that you have, right? As product managers, I think every day everybody will wish for a clean slate, just does not exist unless you go found a company, right? So that's kind of my framework on first understand where your product sits and then internalize the challenges that you need to look at. Okay. So now that we've agreed, there were 4 different paths, but they've all led us to the same destination. You got to be enterprise ready. Now we need to climb the mountain. You need to look at this as your mountain to climb. You need to first train. One of the interesting aspects of building products, right, in general, is also that your training and climbing is at the same time. So unlike a real trek where you could actually train and then figure out, okay, I've been at base camp for a week. I've now conditioned to the climate. I've done whatever fitness regimen to get me to here. Now let's start the climb. In product building, you're going to train and climb at the same time. That's part of the fun too, right? And it's hard to look at it as fun while you're doing it, but it's important to recognize that that is part of the fun. Otherwise, you will not enjoy your role as a product manager or a product leader. So before I get into product, now going enterprise is actually a much bigger change than only product. Product is, of course, I think the most important one, but it involves a few other changes. And I look at product management as a function where you're actively part of the strategy, which means you need to understand how the company makes money, not merely build one feature after another, right? So for that, what happens? There are a lot of things in a company that changes or are set from day one, depending on how you got to the point where you have to be enterprise ready. So the first one is there is a change in mindset, right? It'll either be a change in mindset or an evolution in mindset, depending on how long the company's been around, what they've done in the past. That is a mindset change, because serving enterprises and serving SMBs are completely different things. You will look at every function from customer service to customer success to your solution engineering to engineering, product management, every function. Look at what their roles and responsibilities are. What changes need to be made. You may even create newer functions. Like, for example, if you're selling to smaller businesses, you perhaps won't have a long implementation cycle, because your product would probably be from day one, you can use the product and move on. If you're selling to a larger enterprise, you may have a 3-month, 6-month go live plan and deployment cycle and so on, right? So across every function, you will look at redefining the roles and responsibilities. The third one is you also need to get the right folks, right? There is an aspect of learning and relearning, unlearning as well, right? Sometimes some people are just not the right folks for the journey ahead, right? So there's some letting go, there is some hiring new. So there is an element of chaos that happens too in terms of as a company makes the switch. The fourth one is changing your go-to-market strategy. The way you get people to know your product. If you're a B2B product serving SMBs, perhaps Google and Facebook are your friends or LinkedIn are your friends in terms of ads and drawing them to your product. From a go-to-market perspective, you start looking at outbound. Having your SDRs and salespeople go knock and write emails and run all those drip campaigns, go be part of all these events where we talk to customers. So there is this big change in go-to-market strategy as well. Finally, it's getting your product right? So you do all of this, you still don't get your product right, you're not going to win. But you also need to get all of this right. And it's not only about getting your product right. And I think as a product manager, you need to be aware and not be in a silo that, hey, I'm going to build a product that's enterprise ready. Why it ain't making revenue? It won't, unless all of this is also taken care of, right? So have a holistic view. Understand you may be in a position to influence some of this. In some roles where there are SaaS companies that have a GM-like model where you have a product-led general manager for the business. So a product person is also heading multiple of these functions. So you may be able to influence it more directly. But in a lot of other cases, you may have an influencing kind of position. So you need to be aware all the things that need to happen through the funnel, right? So talking about the funnel, that's where I'm going to start. So now that we've decided that, hey, we'll go enterprise, we are going to get our product ready. and we are going to do all of these other changes. What about product? So I have two ways to think about how you should look at your product. I'm going to start with the first one, where I'm going to talk about the funnel, right? So if you look at a typical enterprise sales cycle, right? Unlike selling to SMBs, where they'll perhaps land off from word of mouth, referral, or coming through Google Ads. It's like the most common one. You will see that if you're a larger enterprise, you're not searching online for what software to buy, because you're also used to being sold software. So you're used to people reaching out to you. If you're in procurement of a larger enterprise, there are people who reach out to you. There are people who get connected to you through introductions, through warm introductions, and so on. And then your process also of buying software is very different. How you evaluate software, how you buy software is very different from how a small business does it. So to start with, the first part of the funnel is to get invited to the party, right? So your product needs to first get invited. People need to know that you exist. So there is a ton of branding and marketing work that needs to happen so that people know your name, know your company, know your product. And there's always an RFP process with a slightly larger deal. And the RFP is basically, think of it as a checklist that somebody came up with to say all of these things and the moon is what we want before we choose the next platform that we'll use in the company, right? And as a product manager, why knowing this is important is, first you need to know what are things that you need to do to get invited to the party. So maybe there are capabilities that you need to build that give you that branding mileage. So like, for example, if you're in a B2B environment, building something that's truly innovative and differentiating, say introducing AI capability in your product, or looking at building integration with some of the fastest growing top marketplaces or others, will get you noticed. So that comes under the get invited to the party, right? And acing the RFP, you need to look at what typically comes up in an RFP. It could be compliance, it could be certifications, it could be capabilities that you need to add depth to. So you need to understand and know what are these RFP checklists. And then you need to ensure that your product can first, at least at a checklist level, go through that stage, right? So somebody takes up what you offer, that your salesperson can give as your brochure or like a first presentation on your product. Then they compare it with their RFP. It should be like, okay, hey, you know what? They passed the RFP stage. So as a product manager, you need to also think, what are some of these capabilities that are RFP requirements, right? That are minimum requirements to get past the RFP stage. The third one is when, okay, you're past the RFP stage. Now you're going to the demo stage, right? So typically the demo stage is, you may have different hierarchy. You may present to a C-level executive, you may present to a VP, you may present to a manager who's actually going to run the software day to day for his or her team. So you need to have in your demo things that appeal to each persona. Think of, for example, Jira, right? It's a great, it's a very, very successful product. Typically, the person who brings in Jira when the dev team becomes bigger is really the head of engineering. The person's not really coding every day, but is really looking to understand, hey, what are the reports I will get? How will I know what is the velocity of my team, etc. Right? So that persona is different from an engineering manager, is different from an engineer. All three of them use Jira. They use it differently. So in your demo, you need to have things that appeal to each of those personas, and you need to think of how do you, in demo, you create that wow for each of these personas, because all of them have to be impressed and say, hey, you know what? I really love this product because it satisfies everything that I had in mind. Let's think more about them, right? Once you do that, then you get past to implementation. So there is a implementation cycle for almost any enterprise company, because it's not only about the ease of use of your product, right? It's also about change management. Typically, every enterprise software has, what do you do, right? You're in somebody's work as it gets digitized is actually done on your software, right? If I'm an executive assistant, in the olden days, my job was answering phone calls or like replying to somebody who walks in to the office, right? Now, what has happened? That is digitized. Now that's on an email. So I reply to emails. I set up calendar invitations. So that's how that job got digitized. And the software for that was the email software. Typical, and therefore, for any other enterprise, what you're really delivering when you're doing enterprise SaaS is you're digitizing somebody's work. And therefore, there is an aspect of change management involved. There is product training, there is product implementation configuration, there is a lot of time integration with the ecosystem. And all of this takes time, right? And only then they start really using your platform and realizing value from you. So there is that time to value. So as a product manager, you also need to think about how do I really make this implementation time not chaotic, right? How do I make it as short as possible? How do I, like, if you have really intuitive UI, you make product training easy. If your product is super hard to accomplish anything, then people are going to need longer training time, right? So you look at what are capabilities in your product from a team perspective that fit into how to get better time to value. So from the decision of buying to really using your platform, that time, how do you make it seamless and how do you make it as fast as you can, right? So that's time to value. And the last one is now that you've gone live, right? Your product is used in that enterprise-wide. You have the customer, they've started paying you the recurring revenue every month, every year based on the contract. How do you increase lifetime value? So how do you make your product sticky? Hey, I'm using this XYZ product now. Why will I not change this product, right? Why will I continue using this product? How is that it is getting better with every year of usage? Like, I'll give you an example. Gmail has this auto reply. If somebody sends something, it'll give you some suggestions, right? It'll say, okay, thanks, or cool, got it. You can try those suggestions, right? One of the things that you will continue using Gmail is if it starts getting your tone. If I'm a person who says, okay, cool, right? Instead of saying, okay, got it. The first time it suggests it, I don't take it, but I write, okay, cool. After like 5 times, if it starts giving me that exact same suggestion, then it feels like magic, right? I'll continue using Gmail. I feel like I get more value as I use the product. It works for me and it gets more better tailored for me and it just delivers me more value. And this is true for an enterprise product too, right? So increasing lifetime value, therefore, has 2 aspects. One is how do you increase your stickiness in the sense of your product cannot be easily replaced. And second is how does any customer of your product realize more value when they keep using your product so that they feel, hey, you know what, I've been using this for 5 years. It keeps getting better. And it was better than the day I started using the product, right? So this is one model. So you looked at your sales funnel from getting invited to the party to increasing your lifetime value with a customer. This is one way, and this can be your themes. This is how you can structure all of your capabilities, what you want to build in your roadmap. There's another way to think about it. And this is a little bit more functional way of looking at it. Assuming that you do the outside in thinking and you have a fairly good picture. One of the ways also you can think through this is do a set of features that aligns your product better to your new go-to-market strategy, right? Just say, hey, all of this is to ensure we are aligned better to the new go-to-market strategy. So this will be features that are like the funnel example, right? Things that help you get invited to the party, all your marketing, PR wows, things that help articulate better value proposition against competitors, things that make you better shine in an RFP process and so on, right? So build a set of things that align better to your new go-to-market strategy. I will go in depth on each of these 4 as I go through. Second one is, hey, I've been selling this product. I have a V1, V2 of this capability or this use case already thought through and built. But I know that as I go into an enterprise, it changes and I need to now build more depth. So have a theme where you keep building more depth to your product and see what we'll do there. The third one is building more non-functional capabilities, right? And there's nothing to do with adding a new use case, nothing to do with making a PR splash or making a better demo. This is just ensuring that your product is stable and robust. A big reason why enterprises choose quote unquote boring software is because it works and it is robust and functional. right? And it does all the things that is expected to do. So it's essential as you think of your product that how do you make all these non-functional things go? I'll go in a little bit more detail on each of these topics. And the last one is really looking at legal and infosec. It's an acquired taste for most product managers, in my opinion. They think of sales as their friends, which is good, necessary. Good product manager also look at marketing and build bridges there. But I think you also need to build bridges legal and infosec. So we'll talk about all four. So you can choose either of these. I've made the funnel as one way to look at the framework, or the four functional ways to look at it. Either way, you'll see there is significant overlap irrespective of how you want to think about it. So going into the first one, right? Aligning better to the new go-to-market strategy is everything. You need to understand who are the different personas, build for each of them, understand who's your power user. Like take the Jira example I spoke about. The power user is actually really an engineer or a engineering manager, right? But the person who makes the buying decision is not really the engineer. The engineer can't say, I want Jira or Trello to really do my task tracking. That's probably done by the head of engineering. So you need to know who the decision maker is, what his or her priorities and need from your product is. You need to also make sure your power users are happy, because otherwise they buy the product and then in 3 months, nobody's happy with what they've bought and then they think of switching, right? So look at the decision maker, what are things that you need to win? Look at the power user, what are things that you need to build? And there is always, for every enterprise deployment, there is a champion, right? The champion is typically someone in the IT of the enterprise team, or whoever is the functional owner. So if you're selling like customer support software, the customer support head is the champion. Or if you're selling sales or marketing software, really your CRO is your champion, and so on, right? So you're selling it to some function in a company, and the head of that function is probably your champion. That person is bringing this product in to the company, promising a business outcome. So how do you really make the champion look good? And in a lot of ways get promoted, right? If your champion gets promoted after running a few initiatives that involved your product, that's a great B2B product, right? If you can make your champion look good, that's a great, and like there is this anecdote / joke that people talk about, right? Nobody gets fired for buying IBM. That's of course said in a more defensive, conservative way, but there is some truth to it, that at the end of the day, some of these buying decisions and change decisions that happen in enterprise companies are career impacting decisions. They either make or break somebody's career. So also think of what are these business outcomes and how do I make my champion look good? Automatically your product will now start really delivering value, right? The last one, which I want to reinforce a little bit more, is look at what problems are worth solving and what are not. A big part of product management is saying no 99 times out of 100, and then saying yes and then doubling down on that. So look at what is worth solving. It's hard to get this right all the time, right? But it's important to be deliberate. It's important to be mindful about where you're saying yes and why you're saying yes, right? So these are 4 pillars in my mind when you align to a new go-to-market strategy. When you build depth, so building depth is not about building newer use cases, right? Building depth is now really doubling down on use cases that you know are winning use cases that you're probably already doing at some level, but thinking of, hey, how does this solution look at 100x scale, right? Take any B2B software, like look at Zoom, right? Zoom had a bunch of features when it was used primarily for meetings where either salespeople were demoing, or you had that one-off meeting with somebody who's in a different zone, right? But when work from home happened, they started looking at completely different set of features, also functionality-wise, right? Hey, suddenly we have meetings where having 50 people on the Zoom is, yeah, that's a small meeting. 100 people, yeah, that's more the norm, right? So suddenly that scale changed, the usage changed. How do people interact with the product change, right? So think of how does the complete use case happen now with 100x scale, and what are things that need to change. Like one of my favorite examples is every product has some list that you can search, add, etc., right? When you have a smaller number of users, you tend to not think of there'll probably be 10 elements. Like think of a product where you add users, right? Trello or Asana or Zoom, right? like take the today's Zoom session, right? We have participants, we have search at the top. When Zoom were built, perhaps for a smaller audience as a target persona, right? It wouldn't have the search that it has today. But now when I have 120 people already in this call, if I want to search somebody, I can't scroll down, right? The infinite scroll is not going to help me find that person easily, right? So therefore, I now build the search. That's one example of building depth to a product. Now I build that search because, hey, now my product is going to be all the time used by more people. So now search becomes an important capability, right? So that's one example. So you will think of, therefore, on every product and look at, hey, how does it work at 100x scale? And look at what UI patterns need to change. Sometimes having simple intuitive patterns break when you need to just support 100x scale. And one of the overlooked things, and this is a learning that I have had too, where you don't look at integrations as a key part of your strategy when you're only serving smaller businesses, right? When you start serving an enterprise, you understand that there's an enterprise ecosystem. Your product is only one part of it. Your product is not the only product in that company, right? So you buy a Jira, then that integrates with your Slack, right? So if Slack and Jira don't integrate well, half the value that you get out of both of them is gone, right? So you look at what the ecosystem for your product is within a typical enterprise, and how do you play well with the ecosystem. So you need to be integration friendly. This would mean you have a good API strategy for your product, and at the same time, you also look at what are your first class integrations. You need to look at how do you look at integrations as leverage even for distribution, right? So that's one of the things I think is slightly non-intuitive, but very, very important as you do. And the last one is being implementation friendly. So this is something that if you're selling to smaller businesses, or if you're just starting out with your product, you don't really think of the phase where what happens between buying and then going live, right? With an enterprise, as I said, because there's also a huge amount of change management involved, there is an implementation process. How easy is your product to implement, right? And how can somebody just go live? Can they go live in a week? Can they go live in a month? If your competitor is going live in 2 days, you better beat that, right? If your competitor is going takes implementation time of 6 months, it's a great opportunity to differentiate and say, hey, you know what? It takes 6 months to go live with somebody. We can get you live in 2 weeks. You look at a lot of the SDKs that come up, right? SDKs say, hey, you can integrate our SDK as an app developer in 15 minutes. And that's all you need to do, right? You don't need to have that huge cycle of, that's actually a product feature. If you think about it, being implementation friendly is a capability that you need to build and design for in your product. And
hey,
non-functional
Gireesh, can we wrap up in 2 minutes? We have time for some questions.
Yeah, but we are almost at the end.
Perfect. Okay.
So
good.
So I spoke about performance, reevaluating your tech debt, reevaluating what does good UX. And one of the things I want to reiterate is fast is a feature, right? To really make your product fast and performant is as good as adding a new feature to your product. So really look at how you can make your product functionally fast and scalable. And also look at, as a product manager, what are features that are no longer relevant or how to hide some of them. So discovery is one other thing that you need to start looking at, because as you build more depth, you're also going to build more capabilities. And then your product becomes a little bit of how my daughter keeps her playroom, right? Everything is stashed. You just can't search for anything, but it's all there, right? So how do you really understand what features to hide, what features to kill if needed, and how to make it easy to organize your product, right? It's the last one, and we'll keep this short, is look at certification and compliance, and look at them as first class capabilities in your product, because a lot of the time that is what will make or break how your product's sold. Learn what are non-negotiable and build for it. Make friends with legal and infosec so that you know exactly what is non-negotiable. So you do the minimum in some of them and get away, and think of things where you can use it as an advantage. So if you're selling to healthcare companies, being HIPAA compliant might actually be an advantage to your product. But GDPR compliance is not a choice, right? So you need to just be GDPR compliant. So you need to figure how to get it done, right? So understand the balance, build those bridges. So I'm at the end of what I want to talk about. I want to leave with one thought. I think awareness and knowing some of this is probably the start. Like I'm a big believer in learning by doing. I hope all of you get opportunities to build such products and have a lot more richer learnings on the way, and we share it with the community along the way too, right? So with that, I'll stop sharing. We'll look at questions.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that I can speak for the audience, a lot of insights, right? So everyone, please head over to Slido. Link is in the chat. Over some of the questions right now. So the first question we're going to go over is from Samantha, and she do you follow the MVP approach when building for enterprise? How do you design what features to include in the MVP, and how do GTM with the MVP?
Yeah, so you do an MVP approach, right? Depending on, as I said, it is contextual. If your product already exists, then there's no MVP concept, you're only building depth. If you're from day one building for enterprise, you should build, right? I just have a slight different thinking on, don't build only a viable product, right? Build a sellable product. In the sense that, so align into GTM, don't build minimum things that just tells you that, hey, we are also there. Build something where you know why should somebody buy you, right? So build a minimum sellable product, more than a minimum viable product. But you do follow that, because you cannot build everything in one day, right? Like as we found out, it's actually hard to get through everything in even 30 minutes. Right? So if you build a roadmap, you're probably going to have 100, 200 items that you wish you were able to build, and you don't need to build all of it, right? You need to build your minimum sellable product, get traction, learn from your customers. There is no better way than learning from your customers. So you should come up with a minimum sellable product and understand why you will win and build those. I hope that answered the question. We'll go to the next one.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Should I just read
is... Sure, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay.
So to get invited Rachel... to the party, right? So Rachel, so I think to get invited to the party, one of the things as a product manager you need to do is you need to understand and read RFPs. I think it's a useful exercise. You need to know what your buyer is looking for, right? So you need to read RFPs, understand what that means. A lot of the time, what will also help you is you'll understand the vocabulary of your customer. A lot of the time, most PMs, because we are building B2B products, you are not really a target customer, right? Unlike a B2C product where I am a user of Facebook or WhatsApp or Gmail, I'm not really a user of every B2B software there is. So reading RFPs is a good starting point. Understand the vocabulary of the customer and what they're looking for, and also getting into sales conversation, being part of sales demos, thinking of what your marketing pitch is going to be, are all good ways to know what are the things that can get you invited to the party. And then you bring that learning and figure from a product perspective, how do you really build out those capabilities?
Great, thank you so much. Next, we have Prakash. How do you do competitor analysis and perform competitive offerings in real life time?
Yeah, I don't know if that real time is a question on how fast you can do. You probably don't need to be very fast. Right? Competition also doesn't change so drastically. See, you need to look at competition, right? And my previous boss used to give a really good example where he used to talk about, imagine you have a budget to buy a car, right? You're going to say, oh, this is the budget I'm going to be in, and then you decide, right? So if you're at the high end of the budget, you look at cars that cost so much. If you're at the lower end of the budget, like in India, for example, you either go at a 10 lakh budget car or a 20 lakh budget car. And then you look at different cars, right, in that budget range. It's exactly the same that happens even at enterprise software level, right? So you need to know who your real competitors are. In a space, there may be multiple competitors, but there are some products that you're in the same vicinity to. So if you're just starting out, who's probably the market leader might not be even a relevant competition, because if that product is in the fray, if you don't have a chance to win, they are not really a competitor, right? So look at who your real competition is in your budget range, and pricing is also a factor in this. And then figure what your differentiation is going to be. And this also will actually give you some insights on, you probably don't need to build everything that is table stakes, because nobody buys a product that is just as good, right? Like, oh, okay, I'm just as good as that product, by me, nobody buys, right? So you need to figure where you want to double down as what your unique story is, and then be good enough, right? And this is exactly how, for example, even we should look at our careers, right? If I'm good at some things and I suck at some things, I probably don't need to be moderately good at everything in life. I probably won't get anywhere. I need to be superlatively good at something and ensure that I don't suck at a lot of other skills, right? And that's enough to actually get ahead in career and life. Same way, products also need to think of what your differentiators are, double down and be very good at that. And then figure what are the minimum bar to meet in some of the capabilities, and just do enough to get there. That'll also drive a lot of how you think about prioritization, what competitive features to go behind, and not really end up building everything your competition has. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Next, we have Krishna asking what research methodology you suggest for a B2B SaaS product who proved success with small, medium-sized companies, but struggling to get any enterprise clients.
Okay. So I think very, very interesting question. So I think you need to do a competition mapping. You need to do your company's strategy and brand, right? Sometimes you're also not getting clients because nobody really looks at you as an enterprise player. So you don't get invited to the party at all, right? So, so I think you need to, the funnel exam framework that I had shared, right? Look at if probably you're not, if you're not getting customers, that's at the bottom of the funnel, but where are you dropping off? Are you not getting invited to the party? Are you failing at the RFP stage? Or are you failing at the demo stage? Or is your implementations a failure sometimes, even if you get one or two? So look at where you're failing and look at where your opportunity is, and always contextualize it to who the competition is, right? It's always about alternative, right? Like if we don't like Zoom, then we look at not like a mythical product, but you look at, say, a Google Meets or a Microsoft Teams or whatnot, right? So look at what are the alternatives, what is working for them, and have a distribution first mindset, right? So look at how do you get invited to this party, what is your differentiation, why will people talk about your product? But it's a very, very detailed question. I mean, the answer is probably going to take hours, but I think that's a few pointers on how you can get started. But it is a real challenge. I think a lot of companies kind of don't cross the chasm. If they want to evolve into selling to enterprises, they just don't make the jump. Okay, on
beautiful.
creating
Next
documentation.
We have Rezvani saying, what's the most agile way to create documented communication between departments in scale up progress, beside using
hard.
apps like ClickUp?
I think companies grow fast, functions grow in silos. I don't have a magic answer. If I knew, I would actually build that product. but I think, see, written documentation is probably the hardest because people don't create the documents. Everybody wishes that there was more documentation, but nobody wants to write them and also organize them. Both are hard. Sometimes companies get into a spree in 3 months. They write a lot of documentation, but it's incredibly hard to search. Right? Be it Google Drive, Confluence actually does it slightly better than Google Drive. So I think of that's also a product, right? How to build and search and make your documentation living organism is a product thinking in itself, right? So so think of that, and first of all, promote more written documentation. I think now with all the work from home, that's almost a necessity, right? Otherwise, people are in meetings all day, not building products, but talking to each other and telling the same context over and over. So the first step in my mind would be to move to more written communication. Written documentation also forces people to think. but and irrespective of the apps that you use, right? I think everything comes with its own advantage and disadvantage, right? From everything from Google Docs to Microsoft Office to like Notion to Trello, whatever you use, everything has its own cult following and things. So I think written documentation is probably the first step. Organizing written documentation is the next step. I don't think there is one way that works. It's a lot to do with the company and the culture of how they embrace some things, right? So
Thank you so much. Next, we have Sean asking, in your experience, what's the most optimal, efficient way to conduct discussions, e.g. changing a feature with your dev team, especially an outsourced one? And this will be our last question of the day.
okay, outsourced one is okay, if you're building a product company, don't have an outsourced dev team. That's something to change. But um, I think writing down your expectations as a product manager and being as explicit as you can. See, one of the things that is a good habit, right? Depending on your product, I'm guessing if it's a B2B product, there is some amount of workflow involved. So there is some UI UX to it where you can show some screens, and then there's also some aspects of what really goes on the server side where there are either some APIs to be developed or that's also part of what you launch. So have for both of them, create that story. I don't mean it in the Jira user story way. I'm just saying create that story of what is somebody going to do and how will that look like, and walk people through it, and ensure that people know why we are building it and exactly what we are building and the problem of what we are trying to solve. Good engineers, irrespective of it's outsourced or in-house, etc., good engineers should help you build good products, right? Good product engineers is what you need to build good products. So ensure they know the why we are building and the what needs to be built clearly. Let them come and refine it with you, right? Look at it as a product manager as a process of uh, refining what you build along with your engineering team, not as a not as a phase where you are done thinking and then they are executing. That'll never really work. You'll end up having a subpar engineering team in the first place, and B, you'll also just not build the right products, right? It needs to come with engineering. Having good product engineers is one of the more sustainable ways of building a good product longer term.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I think I can speak for our audience participants that there were so many insights. Thank you so much for sharing with us.